Welcome everybody to another episode of Buried Pleasures. I'm your hostess, Pollyanna Amazing. Tonight, I have an amazing couple that I've decided to bring out to talk to everybody about how cool this certain lifestyle is. And what they tell me is that they are all about demystifying sexuality and demystifying kink. And I'd love to introduce Lady Petra and Sappher. Please go ahead. Tell me who you are. What's going on today, guys? Yeah.
Well, I'm Sappher Master, and I'm Lady Petra's Dom. Lady Petra is my submissive masochist. We live together in a 24/7 total power exchange. You can ask about that if you're interested. And how that goes is there's no off button. We don't do role play, we don't scene and then go back to regular life. Every part of our life, from getting up in the morning to making dinner to doing the podcast to scening, it's all part of the whole scheme of being a 24/7 couple.
Yeah. Tell me, so for you, Lady Petra, tell me, what does that, what Sappher Master just said, tell me, how does that play into your life? Talk to me about that, if that's all right with you, Sappher Master.
Sure. I'm a switch. So sometimes I step.
Okay, cool.
So for me, it was what I was always searching for without truly knowing. I know that when I was dating really young, because I got married kind of young, and then I was in that for like 30 years. And so I kind of lost myself in that vanilla. It was an emotionally, mentally abusive marriage too. So that was not cool. However, once kids come on board, you're in it for the long haul, Right. But when I saw myself with a window of opportunity to get out, I had to really ask myself now at this new phase in my life, what do I want? And when I go way back to those beginning dating times, I was looking for they were 20-year-olds, so they're not really men yet, but men that would take charge, not domineering, but that's who I chose, but someone who would take charge and make some they knew what they wanted. When we went out, they didn't wishy-wash and sit there in the car for an hour of, I don't know where I want to go. They knew they had a plan. I was ready to engage with the plan. So looking for a dynamic that involves me 24/7 was ideal, because I wanted it to be my life. It calls to me. I know people write about this type of dynamic often with tasks that they have and the rules and the protocols and I guess we have those if you tease it out. But for me, it's a way of living. I like serving the one I choose. I love that. It gives me great joy and satisfaction in my life. But then everybody else, I'm a switch. And so for me, I get to come home and be from work, let's say, come home and be his submissive and bond with him that way. And when I leave, I get to go be in my switch.
I see. Gotcha. And that makes total sense. You're living life just under a different name. That's all. You're living the life that you chose. You woke up this morning and said, this is my life. This is how I choose to live. And I think a lot of people that I've had conversations with in the past really believe that the kink lifestyle or BDSM or, anything that has a sub-dom relationship is something that is forced upon the submissive. I don't think that people truly understand that there are people out there that are interested in having somebody to give them that serenity and surrender, if you will. I love to use that term serenity, or those terms serenity and surrender. I just think that it's a beautiful way to explain just what you were talking about. You're talking about that's the lifestyle you chose to pick. That's what you wanted. And here you are living your best life. So in your switch life outside of that, do you find that you're craving to come back to the dom submissive, or that's just a whole nother part that's just you? That's just part of you.
That's a good question. I would prefer to be at home all the time, because that space is great. And while I'm with him, as I would go to the market or do other things, my switchy switch will switch on. And I get enough of that, as well as in our coaching programs that we run, I'm allowed to be the switch, and I do all that stuff. And so that's wonderful. But my career is very dominant. And I need to be dominant. I crave that. And so for me, to not have that completely, I mean, I can't say I'm a submissive only. I'm not. Although I am to my one, he'll even say, I'm sure there'll be dominant moments for me. Just because it's natural in who I am.
Yeah. Our viewpoint, or my viewpoint for her, is that she gets to live her full self-expression as a sexual creature, however that plays out. Like, I'm not here to draw lines around what she can and can't, how she can and can't express herself sexually. That's not this protein organization here gets to have a say in that, right?
Right.
But I'm naturally who I am also, and my self-expression is completely unconstrained for the first time in my life. So the way I look at it is, in my former life, a lot of my sexuality was very constrained. I couldn't talk to my then wife about the things I was fantasizing about, because it just, grossed her out.
Right. I understand that completely. I've been in a monogamous relationship before that, you're either like, there's a possibility that you're being cheated on if you're not in a, in a polyamorous situation. And then at what point do you tell yourself it's okay it's not cheating if you allow certain parts of your relationship to become open? That's a hard sell for some people. And I can hear that when you're talking about being married. That is what we do. It's possession. You're my possession at that point. You don't get to share yourself with other people.
Right.
But in your current situation that you guys have both agreed on, again, I loved how you called her, what'd you call her? This protein
mass organization.
I love that. Yeah. I mean, because that's what we're all just a bunch of little pieces of protein floating around on a rock, right? So right. Everything is literally not there. It is, if you make it there, that's how that works. I think that's brilliant. Thank you for saying that.
I told her when we met, because I got into kink, my marriage ended before hers did, about 4 or 5 years before hers did. And so I got to explore kink the way I wanted to. I made the choice to not have a relationship that wasn't completely sexually open, self-expressed. Sure. And so I thought, well, I've got to take a deep dive into kink. And so that's what I was doing. So I had a little more context for it when I met her. Mm-hmm. And what I said to her is, look, I'm a stand for your freedom and your power and your full self-expression. And while she didn't have a context for that sort of resonated with her to the point that she thought, okay, I'm going to look at, what I'm up to in this space. Okay. Yeah. And so that's sort of how our conversation got started, and over the course of time, she put herself forward to be claimed, which was a process. And over the course of time, I offered her a collar. And so she became my collared slut. Mm-hmm. And then we got recolored again last year. And now we're just coming up on 3 years. And so, it's been an amazing experience to live completely unconstrained as a sexual creature, completely. Yeah. And out of that, we both discovered something that was missing in our lives before, which was access to intimacy. Mm-hmm. And so through kink and through being self-expressed and through being just completely open with each other about our sexuality, we were able to create a space where we could actually offer each other real intimacy for the first time.
Yeah, that's a brilliant. And let me ask you, Saffir, how did you, I know you were married before. Yeah. How did you fall into kink? Because I'm guessing that that's not where you started. Most people don't that's not their first sexual experience for the most part. Some it is, but how did you get into kink yourself?
I had a couple of experiences when I was a kid. Mm-hmm. I grew up in South Africa, and corporal punishment was common in schools. And there was an experience I had with a girl who sat in front of me, and she used to sit on my foot, and she got called out and ended up getting caned in front of the classroom. And that was a very arousing experience for me. And then I separately had a kink magazine when I was a kid that I got when I visited Berlin.
Mhm.
And in this magazine were very particular kink stories that I really like found myself like reimagining and fantasizing about for years. And
Mhm.
then through the course of my marriage, I cheated on my wife because we weren't having much sex at all
Sure.
with kinksters. And so I started to have little kink experiences here and there that just had me realize like, man, this is what I need. But like her, you know, I had kids and I stuck around to have my kids graduate high school and college. And then we were done. And then I thought, okay, so what's missing for me? And my first missing was I just want sex that I enjoy, right? Like that's what I want, you know? And so I started to explore kink and I was having kinky sex with really interesting submissive women. And there was still something missing, which was intimacy. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to find somebody who's looking for what I'm looking for, which is a lifestyle kink experience where sex is front and forward and kink is front and forward. And we can't build a relationship unless that's resolved. Because I'm not doing what I just did again, right? You know, I want the sex I want to have all the time.
Who doesn't? Who doesn't want their cake and eat it too, right? And that's what you've done. You've made it so that there is no cheating if the definition of cheating is not that, right? Like you can have these open relationships with other people, but you're still intimate. That intimacy piece that you have with Lady Petra, I think is I that's where the confusion starts for a lot of people is how in the world do you have that ability? But it can happen. That's what we derive pleasure from. That's what this is why I call this series, What is Your Pleasure? What's your pleasure? Because a lot of you know, there are so many people out there that have their own definitions of what pleasure is. And I'm really glad to hear your podcast, number one, Kinky Cocktail Hour. Fantastic. There is, and this is one of the things, listeners out there, that I want you to understand is there are a lot of different terminologies. There's a lot of different usages of different, you can call it what it is. You can make up your own terms, but listen to what we're saying today and understand that we need to learn the definitions of all of the things that we're curious about so that we know, so that we can make a judgment call on our own, not just say, oh, I saw that magazine. It was scary. I can't imagine how they could, you know, tie people up and that's another thing. The misconception of you're keeping her collared, right? You're not keeping her on a leash and walking her to work. That's not what's happening. But I think that's a misconception for some people when you're saying you're living in that lifestyle 24/7.
Yeah.
Because they just don't understand the terminology. And so when you say collared, let's talk about that. Tell me about what happens when you get collared.
So there are people that walk to work on a leash, and that is people who are in 24/7s, and that's the way they lead their lifestyle. What happens is, not that I necessarily want to be led to work on a leash, but I wouldn't mind it either. But you still run into, even though we're 24/7 and I have my collar on when I'm in public, when I go to work, I have a permanent collar on all the time on my ankle. And so no one really knows what that is or cares. But my hard collar is really big steel collar, and I wear it on the weekends, like when we're home and I'm not going to work, it's on all the time. So I go to the store and I forget that I'm scaring people probably. So sometimes I put a scarf on and wrap it up. But the idea is collaring is no different in the sense of what happens in marriage when people give each other a ring.
Right.
It's just a collar on your finger versus on your neck. What I love about collaring, whereas marriage and let's just say weddings have a context because we both done them. There's a lot of social pressure on all what should happen, what needs to happen, the morality of everything. And what was fantastic about our collaring was that we, as two adults at this point in our life, chose what we wanted to do, what we thought was important in our ceremony. We didn't go look up in a book or talk to a
Pastor.
officiant or something like that to find out how we should do it first. Do we need to read a poem first and do this? We just created something that had meaning to us, which was super powerful. For me, my collaring is way more powerful than my wedding ever was, or my marriage for that matter.
Yeah, it's a commitment, it's a commitment. But the question that you ask is a more interesting question, which is, what does it actually mean? And what it means is that we're connected. It means I own her. She's my property in the sort of kinky sense. But, she has agency. She can come and go as she pleases. She can, she makes the cocktails that we have on the cocktail hour. She doesn't ask me what we're drinking. She tells me what we're drinking, right? She has permission and an invitation to demand sex whenever she wants.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, that's not a problem, right?
No. My
My
point is that she's not a slave. We examined the question of, is she a slave or is she a submissive? And, I value her agency.
Sure.
And she values her agency. And so there wasn't a rational way to have her occur as a submissive outside of agency.
Right.
So then the question is, okay, what's next for us, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the coloring experience for me really lives in the world of the deepest human connection I've ever had.
Like, it's a big deal for us, the collaring. I know that, and with no disrespect to any other couples that are collared, but there are quite a bit on FetLife, particularly people that they start to hook up, and so now you're collared, and it's a way of showing possession. That is correct, but it's more, I would construe that more as like a play collar or a role play collar, a collar of ownership. But to be collared and go through a collaring ceremony, that's like you're committing your life to somebody.
What you just said, it's to be collared. It's a way of being.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. Because you're collared when the collar's not even on. And with myself being collared, he's collared too.
Right.
That's the power of the collar. When we have to take the collar off, because I'm going to go to work the next morning, and I get up at a god awful early morning, so we have to do it at night.
Mm-hmm.
We both feel that pang of like, and it's, when I was early in my marriage and, thought the world was great, I would take off my wedding ring, like to do something like bake bread and be like, that feels weird. It's the same kind of feeling.
Yeah. I mean, it's a symbol of a deeper connection.
Mm-hmm. And I appreciate the fact that you're like the way that you're talking. I had another friend on that does, he's a leathersmith, actually, Royal Creation Leather, my friend. So he talked about, he does pup play, and they have collars, they have, the big locks and that sort of thing. And, that's a whole nother realm of collaring, but it's not the same as what you're discussing. It is a relationship, and there may be 3 or 4 people in that relationship that are collared, that's their pack, that's who they are associated with. So I just like to know like the definitions of what these things mean, because they're interdependent with couples. And, like you were saying, she is allowed to do what she wants to do. You don't have, constraints in that nature, but some do. And it's dependent on the couple. It's dependent on, or however many people are in the relationship. Correct. That's just how that works. And I think that I think it's great that you, on your podcast, that you discuss these different types of kinks and the way that different people are, involved in those kinks. Because again, how do you know if you don't ask? And some people are afraid to ask. And you know what happens sometimes when you ask questions, you might think you like it. And it might be something you'd be interested in, right?
Well, that's a big part of our conversation. It's all about demystifying this world of sexuality, right? Because there's no right way to be. There's no right way to be. We talk to men who dress up as women and women who dress up as men, and we talk to, women who dominate men and men who dominate women, and men who are submissive to women and men who are submissive to each other, and women who are submissive to each other and dominant. There's just absolutely no right way to be. And so rather than like impose our structure of morality or what we consider normal on others, we just like are curious, like what can we learn
Yeah.
from you that we can incorporate into our experience of sexuality. And it's been really fascinating.
Well, and that's the key. We started this podcast basically because after scening on a daily basis, we would sit down together, have a cocktail, and debrief. And we're both really big communicators. And over time, not too long into it, we said, God, that was a really great conversation. We should have recorded that for time's sake. And then we just kind of said,
Okay, well,
on
let's
a
do that.
whim, let's just do a podcast. And it started with like our iPhone, literally recording on our iPhone. And that was for a long time. Actually, we didn't get a microphone for a long time. And if people, we have a huge directory of over 400 something.
482 episodes.
Yeah, it's a huge directory. But if you actually go to the beginning of the directory, you can trace our journey. And that's the key I was trying to get to, is that this whole pod developed. And I think we've become some type of information providers in the kink community just by sheer volume and the time and the people we've interviewed. However, that was not our original intent. The intent was to record what we're discovering on our journey, that we wanted to have something to hang on to that was our journey. Because really, quite frankly, if I go back to some of those earlier pods, I'm a completely different person than I was then.
Yeah, you've evolved a lot.
Yeah.
Now, we ran out of content like pretty quickly because we had all these conversations, and we thought, well, we should ask other people what they're up to. So, and that's how it started, right?
Well, now that I have listened to several episodes, not all 400 by any stretch. I'm sorry. But I have listened to quite a few, and I'm very impressed with how your guests, the explanations, the authenticity, let's just say it that way, the authenticity of the people who are involved. And so now that I know that that's there, when I have patients or clients or, people who come to me for sexual advice and, because they know I'll speak my mind and I'll give them the honest truth, I'm going to send them to you to listen to your show, because number one, you make great drinks on there. Number two, the conversation's fabulous. And why not? Because in my lifetime, I believe that I have begun to, as I've gotten older, almost 50, who knew? It takes a little while, guys. You just don't grow up this way. Like you're super lucky and you have really cool parents. Anyway, what I think has happened for myself is I have become this more open being and ready to whatever information that I can discern and filter down to other people when they're asking me for help. I want to be able to provide that. And I want to surround myself with those like-minded folks who can make it easier to do this type of conversation, the demystifying, the ability to make something that people think is raunchy and dirty or terrible into something that's a beautiful relationship that you guys have been in now for how long? 3 years now? Well, however
We've known
long.
each other for just about 4 years.
So there you go. So, and it cuts out the middleman of not knowing, guessing, wrong guesses, those sorts of negative behaviors that we get ourselves into based on things that we have no idea. That's what we do.
What's great is if you have a niche interest, you've probably done a podcast about it.
I know.
So you can probably search our directory and find a really
Keyword.
in-depth conversation about that. Like for example, I've never considered splashing anything I'm interested in. But we talked to a splasher and we had this really great conversation about splashing. And then it was the election coming up.
Yeah, it was the election.
And Lady Petra decided she's going to splash for this to get people to vote, right?
Oh, okay. So let's stop a second. Let's rewind. What's splashing for the audience?
Using food or liquids, edible items, and usually filling a bucket. Sometimes people do porridge. Sometimes people do grits, and then they pour it over themselves. There's something they find sexualized about that.
Yeah. Now we didn't have sex around splashing.
No.
we just used splashing as a way to encourage people to vote.
Yeah.
Right.
But, we would never have thought of that, right? That would never have come up for us.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
That's interesting. That's very, see, those are the kinds of things. Again, no, there's not a whole lot of people out there that I'm sure I was familiar with that terminology just based on another show that I did. That's not something that I learned in school, kids. That's it's just something that I found later on. But that's the thing is, splashing sounds dirty, right? It sounds intriguing, but really it's just people pouring cream of wheat on you. Yeah.
Pretty much. There's actually products they make for splashing.
I love it. I mean, like that's really a fantastic thing. But see what you did with it. You turned it into something that you could make a positive out of, and also educate people on what the heck it is. I love it. I love it. These are the things that make people such as yourselves the kind of people that I would like to associate myself with, so that I can do like I can learn and we can get this message out to all other people, so that you don't get looked at like, oh, why are you so weird? Or, oh, why would you do that, whenever it's not like what every other vanilla couple on the planet does. And again, out there, guys, if you're a vanilla couple, I'm not hating on you. I want everybody out there to find the pleasure that makes them have pleasure. That's what I'm here for. And let's keep talking about the podcast, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Moving forward, all of all the interesting guests that you've had on your show, which one was the one for you that you were like, man, this is a great show, and I hope everybody on the planet listens to it?
That's a great question, because we have those conversations like 3 times a week.
Yeah.
Right.
Because we're
Because-
insane.
because-
We pod almost every day.
Because you said it, right? People show up authentically.
Yeah.
They show up as their authentic self, and they have a conversation from their heart. We've had conversations, like we had a conversation with Tina's back, who's a sissy in the UK.
Mm-hmm.
And out of that conversation, she made the choice, out of the conversation, she made the choice to seek the kind of relationship she actually is aspiring to, right? Out of the conversation. The conversation that was one of my favorites was with Dan Savage, to hear his story and just the way he's interacted with the gay youth of this country and just the way he's been political. I really love that conversation. We have so many wonderful conversations.
Well, even just some conversations that are harder to get to, I think, quite frankly, on mainstream would be sex worker conversations with people who are in the industry and living it every day, whether because we've interviewed both kinds, whether it's survival sex work or whether it's on the side.
Right.
But the perspective of that and being able to just speak frankly with people, and that it's not the othering that's over there.
Yeah, we just had a great conversation. We broke it into 2 episodes with David Hunter about consent, non-consent in relationship and in kink. That was an incredible conversation,
Well, we got aware, and again, here we're having a conversation about consent, non-consent, and we've kind of, in our own minds, had kind of boxed that away in a story called, oh, I want you to kidnap me and rape me or set that up or something, right? The typical concept, right? And had never really put much thought into it. And we're having this conversation and I have an epiphany and say, oh,
that's my
wait
lifestyle.
a minute, that's what I do all the time.
Yeah.
Because we have agreements and we have our limits. We know each other's limits.
And safe words.
But because it's a power exchange, I'm not the one predicting what's going to happen, when it's going to happen, how it's going to happen.
Yeah.
It is Sappher's choice at that point, regardless of whether I'm all submissive or he has me top from the bottom or what have you, depending on what we're doing. And it really hit me like, that makes me think about consent, non-consent in a totally different way, as well as understanding that they're really, if you're talking about what's legal and safe, something that's not called assault,
right?
That there, it's a misnomer to say consent, non-consent, because in order to have what you want to have done to you without your consent, there has to already have been consent. You have to have already had agreements. And that the rape fantasy, let's just say, for common among women, is something that they want to have consent. They don't want you to say, I'm just going to slice your wrists up and I'm going to do whatever, there's
Mhm.
consent in there at some
Right.
level based on the person's agreements with the other partner. That's the way to do it safely. And it was interesting because I just had not really put a lot of thought into it because I'm in my dynamic and I'm living my life with pleasure. And I was like, wow, I'm really cutting edge. I make consent, non-consent all the time.
Yeah, it's a bit of a oxymoron, right? It's consent, non-consent. There's always consent involved, always. What people who enjoy that kind of play are looking for is the rush of fear that is also a stimulus for a whole bunch of sexuality for a lot of people.
Sure. And that whole the fight or flight response that you're getting whenever you're the person who is being perpetrated on, let's just say in that situation, that really can be a whole nother world of enjoyment and pleasure that you didn't know you could get to, I guess. But the consent, non-consent thing, that's very important. And, like you were saying, safe words. If guys out there, if you don't know what the safe word talk means, what it means is that I may have consented that I want to have these pleasurable things done to me. And then in the middle, if I decide that maybe this is not what I thought it would be, I can use my safe word to safely say, I just want to stop right now. And if you have this wonderful Dom sub relationship, like I think you guys are awesome. You're so sweet. I love this. I think I'm so happy to have found you. I think that people really need to understand that if you have that kind of relationship, that you are giving your power over to your dominant, and they are your intimate partner as well. So they understand when you say, okay, look, can we slow down a little bit? Can we change things up a little bit? Because that's how the power dynamic works.
Well, we like to say we did the work, right?
Right.
So all kink dynamics require trust.
Mhm.
Absolutely require trust.
Yeah.
And we don't get to trust like out of the gates. You got to earn trust.
Right.
And communication.
And communication is the source of that.
Key.
Yeah.
And then we have a couple of agreements with each other. Like one agreement we have is we don't allow space to occur between us. Right?
Yeah.
Because it's inside of space that you start to develop stories and contempt. So we just don't allow space to occur. So if she feels space developing, it's her responsibility to like confront it, right? And same with me. The second thing that we've agreed to is we're both 100% responsible for the dynamic. Like I'm not more responsible than she is. It's not 50-50,
Right.
because if it's 50-50, we're starting to keep tabs and score, right? So we're each 100% responsible, which means anything that she sees or experiences or is brought to attention of that she thinks needs to occur, it's up to her to address it.
Right.
And it may be something that she talks to me about, but it may be something she just does. And I'm the same, right? So because of that, because our basic communication is sourced in agreements, and because our agreements are based on trust, and because trust comes from communication and from experience, she has no worry when we go into a scene that I'm going to do anything, because I'm actually responsible for her well-being.
Well, what key for me early on when we were, before claiming even, when he was explaining, because I didn't know what that was. He said something that just resonated with me is, I don't break my toys. And I was like, okay. I said, because these things sound extreme, but he's telling me he doesn't break his toys. So that gives me, for whatever reason it resonated, I thought to myself, I have the ability to give him my power now, because I have to be able to trust him in this kind of play. And and granted, there's people out there you trust and they break it apart. That's fine. But at least God, then, right?
Right.
For me, it was like, okay, actions speak louder words. I got to give him my power because he says he won't break me.
And she had safe words also, even at the beginning.
Yeah, even so.
Right. So she had to choose to put herself forward into the dynamic. It had to come from her. She couldn't be persuaded or coerced. It had to be something she freely chose to put herself into, because I'm a sadist. I'm gonna do things to her that she actually has to want to have done, because that's what's gonna happen, right? So my frame is, I'm not gonna be a domineering kind of dom. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna enroll her in what we're up to.
Yeah.
And then she's gonna register into participation. And that's how this has gone, right? And
Right.
so everything about our dynamic is like that. Everything.
Well, and one thing I'll bring up too is there's often, and I don't know if people are actually sharing authentically or they're sharing the story they think everybody wants to hear. But in the dominant subworld, people that are in dynamics, not everyone, but a few you read from time to time, explain the protocol and that, oh, she forgot to put the cream in at this time and there were lashings or whatever. Okay, and maybe that's their agreement and that's fine. If that's what gets them off, that's great. But one of the key things was, I remember the moment where we were playing with my masochism, like training me as a masochist. And I wasn't totally in touch with my masochism, wasn't a whole sure that was it. I'm more competitive than anything. So I was like, I'm going to last just because I'm competitive, And I remember he was trying to work the flogger in different ways.
Let's try to work out how to, give her what she needed.
There just seemed that there was something off, like he was doing it fine, but I wasn't having the reaction that he said over time I'll start to get. And then we sat down afterwards, had a cocktail,
debriefed.
And I said, I knew I could freely talk, but I was kind of like raising my hand, like, I feel like I have to say something and I don't want this to be offensive. And he goes, well, remember, there's nothing, because we agree that there's nothing ever wrong. There's just what's so. And sometimes what's so needs to be dealt with and sometimes it doesn't, but there's nothing really wrong. So we're not ever afraid to say something.
It's not raiding in the house.
Yeah.
There's food on the table. It's
exactly.
something wrong.
Right.
Yeah.
So I said, I just have to go back to my roots on masochism as an athlete. And I said, I kind of think like I'm hearing the music in the background and you're flogging me and it's not even syncopated. I said, and I go, rhythmic. Like with the downbeat, like I said, I played an instrument. I'm waiting for that downbeat. And then I finally said, I just think you need to flog me with the music. And I go now, and then of course I was like all about
apologetic.
I was all apologetic and like, if that means we have to pick a different song or we need to speed the song up or to meet your rhythm, whatever. But I said, there's something about hearing and not until much later did I find out I was an auralist. So I get off on sound like majorly. And so the music's rushing in my ears, the sound of the flogger. And when they connected, my whole world changed. Okay. But we wouldn't have known that without having a conversation that's where we're in the dynamic, but we're sharing freely to make the dynamic the best.
I love it.
Instead of taking these hierarchical roles and thinking, I should just know my place and be only here. The reality is he gave me agency to speak my mind, and it has dramatically changed our dynamic.
So what you're saying, sorry to interrupt you, but just a moment. What you're saying is that you have a mutually respectful relationship to which both of you take control when you need to. Is that what I'm hearing?
Well, basically, we
communicate
very
freely.
Gosh,
what we believe is that it's not like I'm superior and she's inferior.
Right.
We're equals.
That's really not what Dom sub is anyway.
Yeah.
Right. Thank you for saying that.
Yeah.
Subs are powerful.
Yeah. We set the dynamic aside to talk as equals when we have stuff to work out. I don't get to say, you just have to do it because I said you have to do it.
Because that's domineering.
Yeah. That's not how this is. So, we take from the conversations that we have with people and we ask each other, how do we incorporate that into our dynamic? Mm-hmm. And we've done some amazing things. Like we've gotten into the space now where we had a conversation with, I want to say Mystic Chick about Kundalini awakenings. Mm-hmm. And then we started realizing like we're getting into energy spaces where we're just having like this amazing experience, almost out of body experience, you know, and
Yeah.
we're having like this like mutual, like intense, prolonged orgasmic experience. And this is something that wasn't available to us before.
No.
Right. That's what I love, the awakening part. That's the
Yeah.
best. Whenever you, and you just said it, all of the components of this relationship that you've described to me over the last few minutes or so is everyone's dream relationship, I believe, honestly.
Okay.
It really
They can
truly
all have it. Everybody can have it.
right. But the thing is people are afraid to ask questions, or they have been told something in the past, or they saw something that disturbed them without asking the right questions. And how do you know to ask the right questions when you don't know anything about the topic and
I
you're
think it's
just going
more,
on asking?
I think it's more profound than that even. I think people live inside of the stories they tell about themselves. And I think that their stories don't allow them to ask the questions because they won't look good or they won't feel like it's going to help them survive. So
Or there might be shame.
there might be shame, right? So when I was in my marriage, I was fantasizing about kink, but my wife wasn't available for a conversation.
Not even just, I mean, not that you even have, because a lot of times people don't even act on their fantasies. But how erotic is it just to even share your fantasies with your partner, even if it doesn't even include them because they're not the right gender, or it is something that you know for sure they're not into, but be able to be free to speak your truth.
Mhm.
That in itself brings intimacy to a level that is
Yeah.
profound.
Agreed. You
And I
guys-
think I would say one more thing that,
Yeah.
and we see this a lot with people that are asking us questions about the lifestyle and how did we get here? You have to be responsible. You have to, like the 100%, it's 100% zero. I'm my own person. I'm 100% responsible for this dynamic to work,
Mhm.
regardless of what he does.
Yeah.
Because I create him in my actions every day. I create him newly. And then likewise, he's the same for me. What I find is a lot of people want a quick fix. It's no different than losing weight or stopping smoking. They treat their relationships the same way. They want a quick fix. They want tips and tricks to get there versus the deep dive. This was over a year of training and conversations daily
This is the
to
source of
get to
our
this point.
this is the source of our coaching programs,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So we created a way to give people access to what we have
Mhm.
by inviting them to do the deep dive we did. And the way we do it is we created a process of 90 days of inquiry where we send you a question, we have you ask, we ask you a bunch of questions, and it's up to you to do the work. You actually have to do the work, right? Because I didn't get where I got by tips and tricks. I got here by taking a deep dive into my motivations, a deep dive, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And she got here when she took that same deep dive,
Yeah.
Mhm.
right? But what that does is it strips away the onion layers we create through the course of our life,
Mhm.
through the pain and suffering and relationship failures and disappointments and upsets that we keep sheltering ourselves inside of. We just strip all that away till what's left is who you really truly are and what you really truly want. And how do you really truly put yourself forward in a way to be in action to get what you really truly want with your, self.
Yeah, it's not about going on swipe Tinder or something like that to find your mate. People are like, how did you find each other? The idea was he had put himself, he was ahead of me. So he had already had the training and had written in his about on his FetLife profile, his seeking post.
Mhm.
And literally I was going through thousands of people in my general area, just looking, if they had a dick pic, no, they might've been a good person, but that doesn't speak to me. I'm a sapio demisexual. You got to have more substance than that.
Right.
And when I started at the A's, and I'm very anal, so I went very methodically through, and no, I got tired and I got up to like D, I think. And there's a lot of DOMs in D, of course. And so then I was like, oh, geez, I'm going to go to the back of the alphabet, and Z sucks and Y is not that great. And finally I got to S's, and luckily he was SA. And I read his seeking post without looking at any of his pictures, because he had a picture of his current sub at the time. I had, no frame of reference, just read the about, and just stopped me in my tracks. And I was like, no, that was written for me. Like that was written for me, like
to her,
to me.
Yeah.
Like that's uncanny how it speaks to everything I'm looking for.
Mm-hmm.
And I was moved. And then of course I got depressed because I read his whole profile and looked per all his pictures and read his writings and was like, yeah, he's involved. And then I was like, but I can't unsee this. I must reach out to him. And with no intention of hook up or anything, I was literally saying to him, this is who I am. I'm new to this community. What you wrote spoke to me deeply. How do I find something like this? How do I find this? Because
That's phenomenal. That's phenomenal. You were talking about, you didn't just wake up one day and you were there. I have a lot of, I teach Tibetan Buddhist Tantra, and we teach how to have a non-ejaculatory orgasm. That's my go-to whenever I hear these conversations.
He has those all the time.
Right. And you know what? You don't get those overnight unless you're a magical being, which I hope somebody out there is. And I hope that I would wish that on anybody. But that's one of those conversations that I've had multiple times is, hey, all the tips and tricks that I'm telling you right now don't mean anything. You have to live it. You have to practice it. You have to build up your abilities. And what you have done, it sounds like the same. You're building up these abilities, and now you're taking it, you're teaching other people, you're attracting wonderfully beautiful women, obviously, with your writings. You did a great job there. Way to go.
I agree.
So in let's say 5 years from now, where do you see the Kinky Cocktail Hour or your instructional offerings? Where do you see that? What's going on in the next 5 years?
Yeah, COVID sort of got in the way of everybody. Sure. And our intention was to do Kinky Cocktail Hour as a roadshow. Yeah. So we could go into munches and kink communities and bars and just kind of talk to kinksters.
Like have our listeners there.
Yeah, because it's actually a conversation, right? It's not a Q&A. It's a conversation. So that was our intention. And then to tie that into teaching our training program into small groups, because it's really a workshop situation, ideally.
Yes.
So we couldn't do a workshop, so we did it online. But that's the intention, is to go to Scotland and tour distilleries and do Kinky Cocktail Hour recordings there and coaching workshops there. That's
we have a couple dominatrix people that have actual big castles, houses, things like that. They're like, can we run a workshop?
You know what? I mean, hey, you woke up this morning and this is your life, right?
Right.
Yeah.
How amazing is that? I don't think that there is a person out there that could argue any type of argument about how terrible this is. You're open, you're honest, you're a couple who has decided together to go through this journey together, and there's no lying, there's no need for it, there's no need for any kind of treacherous hate or otherwise. You guys have gotten it down, and I think that's beautiful. The fact that you say that you are both 100% responsible for the relationship is also something that makes my heart happy, because so many times we allow our pleasure to be given to us, or we lose our ability to give ourselves pleasure because we've so relied on somebody else to give it to us. And I think that that's just not a place to go. You need to take time and, be present in yourself. And that's something that I'm hearing over and over with your conversation, is how present you are in the day and how you debrief. I love the fact that you said that you have the debriefing, because I think that's a huge part of what a lot of heterosexual couples are missing out on. I got home from work late. I'm tired. I'm going to take a shower. I'm going to have a drink, and I'm going to bed. I don't need to talk to you tonight. That's not how a communicative and wonderful relationship can start out. You just, you get tired, and you guys were married. You understand that you get tired of the same old thing over and over again. And even though this relationship has been ongoing for almost 4 years now, you have these moments of back and forth where you can do fun new things, or you can teach new people things and teach people how to make wonderful cocktails at the same time. I'm down for this.
Well, we actually do a gratitude practice every day.
Bookend the day.
We bookend the day with gratitude. And, at the end of every day, we literally are in bed together and we talk about just the way we use the day up. Because this is it. Like, there's no other it's, like, this is it.
Yeah.
So we have to use this whole day up because there's no other day that's coming. Like, this is it. So we actually end the day with a gratitude practice. And, I believe that gratitude is your access to happiness.
Yeah.
And if you talk to her 4 years ago and you talk to her today and you ask her about where she was in happiness quotient, like, her life is completely different as a result of just engaging in an authentic, loving, intimate, kinky, sexual, gratitude-filled life.
It really is. I mean, I was living in typical, contempt. When is this going to end? Scarcity, not appreciating truly, you'd say it because it looks good to appreciate the stuff in your life that adds to your life, but but not really getting it. And now it's like,
now we literally stop at every single flower
yeah,
that we encounter
and take a picture
because it's
we're
like
overwhelmed with the beauty in the world.
Yeah.
And it's because we're happy.
Yeah.
Right. And all the other stuff just falls away whenever you're where you need to be in the universe. And I truly am I'm a believer in that. And you guys are amazing. But let me finish this off with, if you had to tell a person out there who's looking for more information on kink, or how they could get in touch with you about your classes or your social media, anything like that.
Sure.
How could they find you?
So the Kinky Cocktail Hour is on all the podcast platforms. You can listen to that. You can email me at sapphermaster@gmail.com or ladypetraplayground@gmail.com.
LadyPetraPlayground.com is our website. So that's also a way to get to the coaching, to get to the cocktails, to get to the write-ups, recipes.
You can look for Lady Petra on Patreon, Lady Petra Playground on Patreon.
Yep.
If you want to support the podcast, on FetLife, I'm Sappher Master. She's Lady_Petra.
Yep.
And we're like,
and I'm on all the other media except Twitter lately, because Twitter has got me blocked for right now. But the idea is, if you visit ladypetraplayground.com, all my links are there.
Yeah, on Twitter, I'm Sappher. I don't even know what it is. It's Sappher Master, but it's Master 206 Sappher, I think is what it is.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Anyway, I mean, we're available and open, and we answer questions. We get tons of people sending us messages about the podcast. And we have, if you're interested, we have we call them reviews, but they're just pages and pages and pages of people telling us how this has moved them into some action of some sort. So it's really been fun.
Well, if you can imagine, I have a lot of people that reach out to me to be on the show or to talk about, things that are pertinent in the world of sex and pleasure and that sort of thing. And, sometimes it's a hard sell for me. I have to talk to the people first and get to know what's the story behind this. But after listening to your show, after having this wonderful conversation tonight, you will be my go-to kink guys. I'm telling you. Just because you're open, you're honest, you have nothing to gain but the education of others at this point. It's not like we're not out there just hammering away to get dates. I know a lot of, like, when I do shows like this, the first thing that my colleagues say is, oh, you get all these swinger type people and these BDSM people, and you must be dating like crazy. Yeah, no, I'm just sitting over here happy. But I really want to have people who I can, I want the go-to people. You are the go-to couple when I talk about kink. So I really appreciate you guys taking the time to come on the show, and really, honestly, you may see them again, audience out there. If I can talk them into it, this might be a nice thing to have, every now and again.
Yeah.
just to remind people that there are more ways than just male, female normality guys out there. There are whatever you choose, however you choose to love, just do it with authenticity and with some respect. That's what we need in the world, right? We need some niceties on occasion. Not everybody hates everybody out there. It doesn't work that way. We're
Yeah,
all
just
some good people.
be
Right?
real. Yeah.
That's it. All right.
Thanks for having
And-
us.
Thank
Oh
you.
my gosh, thank you for coming. And just a reminder, I am Pollyanna Amazing and I am on berrypleasures.com. You can find me at Berry Pleasures on Twitter, TikTok, Instagram. Well, just Google my name, Pollyanna Amazing. You'll find me. Anyway, it has been an absolute pleasure. I appreciate you guys so much for coming on the show. Thank you for the education and the authenticity. I can't say it enough. You guys are amazing. Thank you. And guys, don't forget Buried Pleasures. We're all about what's your pleasure this month. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Just Some Podcast Media.